Final quote there about psychological control. Psychological control is an established psychological construct in professional psychology. That Barber quote down at the very bottom, I want you to note who published that book, the American Psychological Association. Then, so we know there's psychological control of the children and how it occurs. The way the narcissistic borderline parent gets the child to reject the other parent isn't by bad-mouthing the other parent. A lot of people think it's by criticizing. No, that's not how it happens. How it happens is get the child to believe that they're being victimized by the other parent. So let's say the child goes off and spends a visitation period with their mom, comes back to the narcissistic dad, and the dad starts questioning the child. How are things at your mom's house? Fine, everything is good. Really, you guys didn't get into a fight? No fight. Really, no arguments about anything? Now, if the child doesn't criticize the other parent, then the narcissistic dad's going to stay on it, and if she doesn't do it, he's going to get cold, he's going to get rejecting, he's going to communicate to the child, you didn't do the right thing. You didn't give me a criticism of the other parent. The moment the child realizes that, the child knows what the dad's wanting. They're wanting a criticism of mom. Well, it was kind of boring over at mom's house. That's all it takes. It's just a little criticism. The dad is then going to inflame that and say, oh my God, I can't believe she doesn't have things planned for you. She's so selfish. She only thinks of herself. She never considers what anybody else wants. Now, it looks to the child and to all the world as if it's the child criticizing the parent and that parent's just being supportive of the child. No, it's incredibly manipulative. Narcissistics and borderline personalities are the best at manipulation. You get the criticism out of the child, then you come in and support it, and you look like the nurturing parent, and the criticism's coming from the child, and all the nasty stuff that you're doing is hidden underneath the child. Notice what I said in that. Oh my gosh, she's so self-centered. She never considers what anybody else. He's criticizing the other mom. He's giving the child a framework for denigrating the mother. But it doesn't look like it, because it's the child who said it was born. And he's just being understanding. And you do that for a couple months, year. That child knows the story. That child knows the routine. They come back from a visit with mom's house. Dad says, how are things at mom? Oh, she was so selfish. She didn't listen to me. She didn't... Gives the dad what he wants, and then the dad starts to go. And so the way that the father, or the way that the mother, the borderline mother, creates the rejection of the other parent is by getting the child to believe they're being victimized by normal range parenting. Now I want to explain a little bit where that comes from. And that's that next page on the handout with the blue diagrams down here. Now that's Aaron Beck at the top. Aaron Beck, again, is one of the top people in professional psychology. And he talks about schemas in our attachment networks. Our attachment system forms patterns of relationships, expectations. What do I expect from myself and from the other in relationship? And then we use these patterns, these schemas, to guide our interpersonal relationships throughout our lifespan. What happens for the narcissistic or borderline parent is they had childhood trauma of their own. That's what created their narcissistic and borderline parent, is that they came out of child trauma, psychological or physical, potentially sexual abuse of them as a child that created their narcissistic and borderline personality pathology. And in their attachment networks are these patterns. John Bowlby calls them internal working models. Beck calls them schema. Freud called it the transference. We know what was happening. We have these patterns in the brain. Now, when the divorce takes place, those patterns reactivate again. And the pattern in the narcissistic brain is very specific. It's abusive parent, victimized child, protective parent. We have that schema pattern, that trauma pattern in the internal working models of the narcissistic borderline parent. Abusive parent, victimized child, protective parent. In addition, the brain is also activating three networks for the current child, the other parent, and me as a parent. And it's the activation of two sets of brain networks, one from the past, abusive parent, victimized child, protective parent, one from the current situation, the other parent, the child, and me. And when we activate those two sets of brain networks at the same time, they become fused, they become equivalent. So we actually have this parent believing that the other parent is an abusive parent, this child is being victimized, and I'm the protective parent. It's called a trauma reenactment. They are reenacting their own childhood trauma in the current situation. The issue is, none of that narrative is true. The child is not being victimized, the other parent isn't abusive, and you're not a protective parent. It's all a false drama, it's all a false narrative, a kabuki theater that is created, and the moment they get the child to believe they're being victimized, that automatically defines the other parent as abusive. You can't have a victimized child unless you have an abusive parent. I don't care what that parent has done or what the parenting, they've automatically been defined as the abusive parent, and then it allows the narcissistic parent or borderline parent to come in and be the protective parent. I'm protecting the child from the abusive parent, and the child says, yes, I'm being abused. The child comes into my office and says, my dad abuses me. I say, well, what's he do? He says, he took my iPhone away. Well, that's not abuse. Why did he take your iPhone away? Well, because I was mouthing off and wouldn't do what he said. That's called discipline. That's not called abuse. But you can hear that, how it forms when the child goes back to their mom and says, Dad took my iPhone away. Oh, I can't believe that. He's so insensitive to you. And she creates this false belief in the child that the child's being victimized. And so the child runs out to the therapists and lawyers and the judge and says, yes, I'm being abused. If you don't explore that to the next level, what do you mean being abused? Took my iPhone away. If you just buy the abuse, oh, yeah, okay. Dad's being a problem. Dad's too insensitive to the child's feelings or whatever. And people start to believe the false narrative that's being created. Now, is there authentic child abuse? Absolutely. I worked in the foster care system. When I was working early childhood, I worked with kids in the foster care system. Electrical cords, sexual abuse. There's absolutely child abuse out there. The way I explain it is, dogs exist. Child abuse exists. Cats exist. The narcissistic borderline personality pathology of a parent exists. The existence of dogs does not nullify the existence of cats, nor does the existence of cats nullify the existence of dogs. Both of them exist. Now the issue is, both dogs and cats have fur, 4 legs, and a tail. So how do we tell them apart? Well, cats have retractable claws. Dogs don't. Cats go meow. Dogs bark. And we can actually look at their DNA and tell them apart. So if you know where to look, you can tell them apart.